Everybody, it's me, your buddy Dave from thedarkstuff.com and the Dark Stuff channel here on YouTube. Thanks a lot for checking out my latest video. Now, folks, initially I was going to come on and do a video about something going on with David Lee Roth and Van Halen. It's been making the music news a little bit, and also a couple other vinyl community channels like The Flip Side with JC made a commentary about it. That was my initial idea, and I'm still going to do that. But doing that and looking into this particular Van Halen record, realize that it illustrates a much larger point about the fatal flaw of streaming, and that's also what I'm going to talk about. Okay, so friends, I'm listening to the final Van Halen studio album, A Different Kind of Truth. Okay, it came out in 2012. It was the first album to feature David Lee Roth since 1984 when he was initially left the band. It was the first album to feature Wolfgang Van Halen on bass, as Michael Anthony didn't come back for that record. Wolfgang was the member of the band. I happen to think it's a fantastic album, just to get that right out of the way. But I do remember when it came out, there's a little bit of criticism from some people in the Van Halen community who were saying that, well, they liked it, but they didn't like that first single, Tattoo. I heard a lot of people qualified of saying, no, I love Different Kind of Truth. It's great. I just don't like Tattoo. I actually like Tattoo. I think it's a great song, so I'm not with you on that one. I think the song, the only one I don't like on it is called The Trouble with Never, but that's a side point. We're not even talking about that. Now, some people criticize the record because it featured reworkings of older unreleased Van Halen songs, which I think is an incredibly dumb criticism. Okay, so if you're writing a song, let's say you're a songwriter and you're dinking around and you come up with something that's pretty good and you and your band are working on it, but you decide for whatever reason you're going to move on from it. It's not the greatest thing, and then 6 months later or a year later you stumble upon it and are like, yeah, maybe I should rework that and finish it. Then you turn it into something else. Is that a problem that you came up with it a year ago, initially, the idea, and you reworked it? Because a couple of songs on A Different Kind of Truth, She's the Woman, Outer Space, Big River, and Beats Workin' are all variations of other songs that had been worked on in the early days of Van Halen, 75, 76, 77. Tattoo is supposedly a rewrite of a song called Down in Flames that the band used to play live back in the late 70s. Again, never recorded. Blood and Fire was initially an instrumental that Eddie Van Halen did in 1984. So you see where I'm going with this. You know, it would be one thing if they took Runnin' with the Devil and made new lyrics to it or something. That's not what they did. These are songs that never were finished, and now they finished them. So I always thought that criticism was completely invalid. And by the way, reworking old songs and repositioning them and redoing, that's not exactly new. Van Halen has already done it with House of Pain, which is a song they were doing before their first album, and then they put it in on 1984, reworked and whatever. So just a side note. Now, the whole controversy regarding Different Kind of Truth as it stands now in 2024 has to do with some videos recently that David Lee Roth has been posting on his YouTube channel. First of all, I love David Lee Roth's YouTube channel because I find him infinitely fascinating. I know he's manic and kind of crazy, and some people can't handle when he's doing interviews or whatever. It doesn't bother me. I find him very entertaining. But in a series of videos recently, he has been overtly critical of Wolfgang Van Halen, and he's done interviews where he's been critical of him. So the initial Different Kind of Truth album, when it was released in 2012, signed a 10-year licensing deal. Signed a 10-year deal with Interscope Records, and when that deal expired, they needed to make a new deal to get it out in physical formats and on streaming. And as of today, there is no deal. If you look at Van Halen's catalog on a streamer, if on Apple or Spotify, you're going to find every album they made except for Different Kind of Truth. And as of right now, their live album that they did in 2015 is still there. I imagine if they did a 10-year contract on that would be up next year, and then that would have to be renegotiated, so pick that up while you can. Now, Roth kind of implies in his video that the reason he's not in favor of it is because, number one, it wasn't a fun album to make, well, boo-hoo, and number two, it didn't do very well. It sold poorly, which is true. But you have to look at the standards of 2012 versus the last time Van Halen made an album in 1984. So addressing his issue about the sales, I would just say it's a different time frame. It was 2012 versus 1984, which was the last time that he made a record with Van Halen, and things are just different. People didn't buy as many physical CDs. We weren't quite at the streaming period yet, but I don't think that's a valid reason to decide not to let an album be out there just because it didn't do well. A lot of times people reevaluate older records that didn't do very well before, or rethink them, and realize, wow, this was like a lost gem or whatever. So as I'm making this video right now, the album, A Different Kind of Truth, is not available on any streamers, and unless you go to eBay to find it, or a used record store or whatever, I'm sure the prices have gone up, you're going to have trouble finding it. It is just not there. And for a major band like Van Halen, that just seems bizarre. Okay, why is that album not out there? What's going on? The idea of licensing issues, and an album is licensed to this label for this many years and then it moves over, is not the problem. I know that's what some people are going to say. Well, it's on a 10-year license and whatever and blah, 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 and Roth won't do that. Okay, that's all true. But let's use the example of like Elvis Costello's catalog, right? It was initially on Sony in America, and then he's licensed a new deal, and then all of it came out on Rykodisc, and that was for like 10 years, and then it came out on Rhino. No, same exact concept. It was licensed to one company, then it moves to another company. The difference is when you bought those Rykodisc CDs and you own them, Rhino couldn't come over to your house and take them from you because now they own the rights to it, right? They're yours. It's permanent. You own these records. The licensing issues are irrelevant to you at that point because you've already purchased the record. Who cares who technically has a right to manufacture and distribute it? No one. Now, I've always been Team Dave when it comes to Van Halen, and when the initial split with Van Halen happened, I definitely went on Team Dave. You know, I was crazy from the heat. I ate him and smiled. And of course, I hit that skyscraper. So I was 100% Team Dave. I never really embraced the Van Hagar era. And it was nothing against Sammy Hagar per se. I don't mind him. I liked him in Montrose. He was all right as a solo artist. I never liked the meshing of those styles. I've always stated that for me, the essence of what is Van Halen is Eddie Van Halen and David Lee Roth. And without those two elements, to me, it's not Van Halen. So now that this album is completely erased from the digital sphere, it brings up a really important point about what's going on in the music business and has been for a long time in this new streaming world, where an album, you can have it on Monday and you're listening to it, you're rocking out in your car, you're listening in your headphones, you're playing it at the gym, and on Tuesday, that album can be stripped from your library and can be gone, and it is no longer available. So that would be frustrating enough. I mean, what if I really wanted to listen to A Different Kind of Truth and I didn't have my own copy to play? I'm SOL, right? And that's how it stands right now. Now, some of you might be like, so what? But there's a bigger point to it, okay? There's a great debate going on right now about what the definition of ownership is. And this more relates to people purchasing digital copies of stuff. Like maybe it applies to iTunes purchases. I don't know. I didn't really participate in that. But it's really coming to the forefront to do with movies. And you know, when you're on like Amazon or your local cable provider or whatever, and it says you can rent this movie or buy this movie, and it's like you rent it for $3 and you can access it for 24 hours. You can buy it for like 15 or 20 or more, and it's supposed to be your permanent copy. You bought the copy. Well, now it turns out, no, you didn't buy it. It can be taken back from you because as soon as the company that sold it to you no longer has the license to distribute it, you no longer have the license to own it. If I have the DVD for a great show, a sci-fi show called Fringe, or this is the Blu-ray actually, and this is streaming on whatever services there are, I don't know, and all of a sudden that show stops streaming on that service, it's gone. You can't watch it, but I can. And the people that own the rights to this stuff can't come to my house and take it from me. It's mine permanently, forever. And I think that's something that we really need to understand about what's going on in this new digital space. Because I would like to know if anybody did do a lot of buying on Apple. Have any of that stuff ever just disappeared? Anything that you purchased, a track that you owned, just disappears? Now, the idea that something could just be gone from the digital space happens all the time. It happens with Roth. Look, I have this album, the DLR Band. This was an album he made in the late 90s, 1998, I think. The guitar player on it was John Five, who's now currently the new guitar player for Motley Crue. It's a great Van Halen-esque rocking album. You cannot find this on any streamers. You can't find it on anywhere. You can only find a used CD. There's no license for it. Roth doesn't seem interested. But you know what? That's his problem, because I have my copy and nobody can take this away from me. I can listen to this album today. You can't if you don't have it. But again, we're really talking about the sort of permanency issue of it for me. Like, for example, here's a great album, The Plimsolls, Everything at Once. Okay? Has their great song, A Million Miles Away, one of the best known songs of the 80s. You can't stream that song with one exception. The only way you can stream that song, A Million Miles Away, is it's on the soundtrack to the movie Speed, which, guess what, is on a limited license too. So at some point, that's going to be gone as well. I have the album. I can play A Million Miles Away whenever I want to. I think this idea was only sort of in the abstract before, and it's now really coming to form here, and people are really starting to see that this is a problematic issue, that in this digital space, when you're just dealing with ones and zeros and it's not something that you can actually hold in your hand, those ones and zeros can be removed from you just as easily as you got them. And that's something you might not think, because it's never happened to you or hasn't happened yet, that it's not going to. It absolutely will. So the initial idea behind me coming on was just to plead with David Lee Roth to, come on, Dave, I love you, buddy. Please make some sort of agreement to get this record out there, because it is really good. And I don't know why you have a bug up your butt about it or why you don't like it. It's okay. You can have your reasons. But the fans, there are a lot of fans who do really like it, and nobody else will get the chance to discover it if it's not out there. But I think this is a good cautionary tale of why, streaming is nice to be able to preview something. I use Apple. I'm not going to say that I don't do it. But if I like something enough to play it 4 or 5 times, like, why wouldn't I want it permanently as mine? And the only way you can do that right now is by buying it on CD, buying it on vinyl, or buying it on cassette, I guess, maybe 8-track if it's an old enough album. But you're not going to get that permanency even with a digital copy or with streaming, because things can be taken away from you. I hope this video made some type of sense. Thanks. Take care. Bye-bye.
So, you have a MySpace page or something?